What if I told you you could have hundreds of ideas in minutes, streamline your design process, and get your work done in a fraction of the time? In this episode of Design Ahead, we're going to be talking about the benefits generative AI can have on your creative process. So, second episode, and thank you so much for the positive reactions on the first one. It was actually really refreshing to hear that not only creatives are interested in the podcast and what we have to say on here, but people that don't necessarily associate themselves with the creative industry as well. And I think that's kind of the balance I want to strike with this, is have it centered around the creative industry and some of the creative processes within that, but also make it applicable to those who maybe don't align themselves with that, and give some more general teachings and provoke a bit of thought about how they can use it in their day-to-days as well. So in today's episode, I want to talk about generative AI, and this is something that is completely decimating the industry recently. Every headline seems to be all about Nvidia or OpenAI, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and you may have even dabbled in some of these before as well, probably namely ChatGPT and Midjourney. So varying levels of familiarity are probably what is the consensus across the viewer base at the moment, and I really want to give a top level perspective of generative AI and then start to dive into some of the key concepts within a product development cycle or a general project management cycle, and start to think about how we can use AI within those different areas to improve the efficiency of our work or improve idea generation and ultimately benefit you and the team and the creative process. So this is something I want to do for any podcast subject. So in the future, we'll be talking about sustainability, the metaverse, and I think it's a really good idea to have a baseline podcast that explains basic principles and some of the key concepts within it, and then jump into things like ethics in a future podcast. So what we're going to talk today is about generative AI, and in three main areas of concept, creation, and coordination. So to start with, we'll look at concept, which is the discover and define areas of a product development lifecycle. So all this is about is trying to get to grips with the project brief, maybe understanding the client and what they do, and get some rough ideas of the goal that you're trying to achieve. So the key people involved in this are going to be leadership, management figures, probably anybody dealing directly with the client or some of their key stakeholders. And I'm also going to group research into this area as well. So the key activities here are obviously trying to understand the project brief, they're trying to set the vision for the project, they're understanding the client's needs and wants, as well as the users when you get into the user research side of things as well. So one of the big problems I think you face anytime you join a project is trying to get to grips with what's trying to be done, or in particular the client themselves and maybe the industry that they operate in. So if you're working with a mortgage advisor and you've never really dealt with mortgages before, it's going to be quite a difficult subject to jump into straight away. Now, one of the things that you're probably going to get is a whole host of documentation that's dumped on you, and you're expected to learn it all by the end of the week and be fully up to speed, which obviously we know is probably not going to work for most people. So what we can do with AI is start to understand some of that documentation by asking it to summarize or bring out the key points within it. Now, I do want to put a caveat that it's important to understand security, it's important to understand the client that you're working with, and especially the information that they've given you, because if you start to just dump a bunch of secret information into ChatGPT, they're probably not going to be best pleased with that, and you run into a whole host of security issues as well with what you're doing. So if you are working with sensitive information, or you've kind of glanced over the documentation and thought it's probably not a good idea to dump this all into AI tools, then have a look to see what's publicly available about the company. I'm sure they'll have a website, they might even have an about us or some guidance about what they do. So can you use some of that and start to digest it that way? Again, it doesn't mean that you have to sit through a whole host of about me pages, but you can start to maybe take some of the information from that and pop it into ChatGPT, or even ask ChatGPT itself to list some information about the company that might be helpful for you. So the next logical step is to start working with the client to understand the project vision and see what would be a successful outcome. So they might have already collected a bunch of requirements from users or business requirements, and you're going to be then working to create some general areas in which the product team will work upon over the course of however long the project is. And in a lot of cases, you'll be using tools from Atlassian, which is probably going to be Jira and Confluence. The great thing that they're introducing recently is the Atlassian Intelligence, which is their way of integrating AI with Jira and Confluence and obviously other products that they provide. It's fantastic for product owners and project managers to start building queries using AI because it is something that is very difficult to get the hang of if you've never used it before. And even if you have, trying to organize all of the information, all of the tags, all of the labels, and remember what everything means, it can be a bit of a nightmare. So being able to create dashboards and queries using AI through Atlassian is something that's going to save a lot of time and a lot of headaches. So next we'll talk about user research, and AI is a very contentious topic right now within that space. There's a whole debate that I could get into, but right now we're going to sit on the side of using AI to help enhance research activities. So I would still kind of expect the user researchers to perform those activities as they do at the moment, which is going out, creating questionnaires, creating the right sort of materials to help them get the information from their user base. But what I'd like to focus on a little bit more is that synthesis of information. If you've put out a questionnaire and you've got 500 responses, it can be a nightmare trying to sift through all of those, pick out key themes, keywords, or anything that you feel is quite valuable in terms of feedback that's coming up quite a lot, or feedback that's showing a break in the system. It's quite difficult to manage all of that. So this is where AI tools can really come in quite handy, is that synthesis of information, being able to put loads of responses into a tool and get a rough summary of what is being said. So if you're looking for key themes and you've got 500 responses, instead of going through them all one by one and maybe color coding them or pulling them out as key points to create a words diagram, then what you could do is put them into AI and allow that to develop some of the key themes. It can do multiple tasks at once if it wants to sort of rank a priority based upon how many times something was said. There's a lot of incredible ways that you can use AI tools to do that. So that's how it can be used in research. And I think after that point, you've looked at the define and the discovery areas of it, and you've started to get a better idea of how you can automate the start of a project and make it a lot easier for yourself and for the team. So the next section is creation, and what I mean by this is anything that helps you get from the product vision to the end goal. So this is all of your design work, your branding, marketing, development, everything that kind of gets you to where you need to be is included within this. So if we start at the start of the creation process, which is likely going to be your idea generation, I think it's really impactful to use tools like Midjourney or Adobe Firefly to help with some of these ideas and creating mood boards or creating some icons or, creating those initial concepts that help you get off the ground. So I know that a lot of people might have used Midjourney just to create images off the fly, but it can be quite good at creating mood boards if you've got a particular theme or even particular colors. It can be used in however you need it to be used, if you get what I'm saying. So if you're a brand strategist, you might have a particular vision on color, or if you're somebody who is developing UX designs, you might have some generic themes that you might want to go for. So I think Midjourney, it's not quite there at creating picture-perfect wireframes, but it definitely is quite positive in trying to create some initial concepts that will start to spark your imagination, and then of course you can go from there. We've also got Figma, of course, if you're UX design, or increasingly more of a creative professional now, I guess. It's not just kind of limited to the prototyping abilities anymore, but there's a lot of AI tools being investigated, I'd say, within the Figma community at the moment. I don't think any are quite there yet, but some of them are getting there a little bit. I'd like to see where things go before I recommend any, but I'd say keep an eye on the Figma community space just to see if there's anything that's being really well regarded as a positive AI tool. But of course, we can use things like UIZard to generate some more templatey frames for Figma. I think, again, UIZard is definitely getting to a point of maturity, but it does kind of base itself upon a core template feature. It still is quite good at getting some initial concepts down, and then you can build from there. But of course, at the moment, there's nothing to just automate the UX design process or even wireframing or prototyping. And then from a developer perspective, you've got GitHub Copilot, which is super, super powerful. I think anybody who's used some of these large language models to help with them coding has realized how impactful and how amazing they are at grasping pretty much any coding language. From a personal perspective, I've used it to help redesign my portfolio site. I'm not super experienced in HTML and CSS. I can get my way by. I can use a Bootstrap template to kind of tweak it to how I want it to look. But in terms of implementing new patterns and components, that is a little bit too far out of my forte. But what I was able to do with ChatGPT is ask it, how can I start to add grey lines within this column so I can help separate some information out? And I didn't even have to refine my prompt. It just told me straight away. Of course, I popped across some of the code that I was trying to experiment with, and it corrected it all. I copied it over, made sure that the class was correct, and boom, it was done. And I was like, wow, this is brilliant. It was responsive. It met absolutely every need I needed it to meet. And it just demonstrated how impactful some of the coding that goes on within these technologies like ChatGPT and, as I mentioned, GitHub Copilot really is. And the third area is coordination. Now, this is a bit more generic, and we're looking more to the day-to-day admin side of work and how we can use AI to help us excel in some of these areas. So things like copywriting and, even writing emails, we've got Grammarly and, again, ChatGPT, which are fantastic at being able to help you construct an email that is well written, to the point, and essentially however you want to write it. I think one of the most powerful things that a lot of people don't pick up on is that these large language models can start to learn your tone of voice. So if you've got a bunch of content like blogs or even emails that you've written before, paste them into ChatGPT, ask it to analyze it and understand your tone of voice, and then try to get an output out the other end. And I guarantee you it's probably going to be quite close to what you sound like. So the third is Microsoft Copilot, not to be confused with GitHub Copilot. Microsoft Copilot is your AI assistant for all of the Microsoft products. Now, it's a little bit hard to get hold of, I've found, at the moment, in the sense that the enterprise license does seem to be very expensive and it seems to be in a case-by-case basis. So I guess access to it is quite limited at the moment, but if you do have access, I would 100% make the most of it. One of the most important things that I've found within it, as I've tried it out a little bit and seen quite a few videos, is the transcript analysis that I can do. So if you're in a Teams meeting and the transcript has been recorded, it's able to provide a summary, it's able to provide some key actions and takeaways from that meeting, which saves so much time, because the amount of times where I've been in a user session from 3 months ago that we then need to revisit, I would love nothing more than a quick transcript to describe the key points and takeaways instead of having to sit through an hour's worth or even just trying to scroll to find a particular topic that we were talking about. I think it's super important to start embedding these processes within your own work. There's tools for Word and PowerPoint and Excel that I'm sure people will find a lot of use in using. So do have a little look to see if your company has the enterprise package for Microsoft Copilot. And if they do, try your best to try and get involved within that process. So what I'd like to do is have a case study which goes over the key themes, the key takeaways, and shows you in an entire product development lifecycle how you can use AI every step of the way to improve your process. So I've worked with ChatGPT to create a fictitious company in brief, which is Spark Tech, who are a startup aiming to disrupt the energy market with cutting-edge solar solutions. Now, off the bat, I've got no clue about cutting-edge solar solutions and the energy market. So this is something that when we start right at the beginning of it, I'm going to need to digest this information. I might do some research on ChatGPT to find out more information about the energy market. If Spark Tech already have something available, then again, I'll try to research that and digest it using ChatGPT and create a nice summary. So the goal is to create a brand identity and a website that allows Spark Tech to be recognized within the industry. It shows their offerings and may even have a Shopify site if there's a B2C element of it. So I've started off by understanding the scope of the work using ChatGPT to digest all of this information. And then I'm going to do some initial research and brand concepts. So competitor research, I can immediately keep on that same GPT page and ask it about its competitors. I think as well, a little side note of the really powerful thing within GPT is its memory. So it does have limited memory across your different chats if you'd like to manage that or if you'd like to input new things. But what it can do really well is if you keep everything within one chat space, it will be able to refer back to things that's previously said and ultimately keep the conversation going throughout. I've started off by understanding the brief. I'm now going to be doing some initial competitor research. I've asked it about its competitors. It's given me a full list and I can use that list to start narrowing down areas in which we want to investigate a bit more. From there, we might have an initial user base from SparkTech, or we might be able to get a hold of some users that are interested in the energy sector, or maybe people who have purchased solar panels before. And we'll probably carry out our research activities as we currently do within that space. Once we've got all of our information, I'll then use AI tools like ChatGPT. It does feel like I'm referring back to GPT a lot, but it's just so powerful and it's free. It's amazing. I think a lot of people should use it in more day-to-day tasks than they realize as well. But we can synthesize all of that information. We can pull out some key themes and start to identify, what makes a good solar energy brand? What makes a good cutting edge energy industry brand? So then I might use Midjourney or Adobe Firefly to do some initial brand concepts. I might see things that are succeeding within that industry and take them on board as reference images. And I might start to generate some ideas that I can at least have a basis of maybe a color scheme, maybe a logo if they don't already have one, and a general creative direction that we want to go in. Then we could jump into Figma and start to prototype some of the initial concepts for the website. So again, I probably wouldn't use too many AI tools here, apart from maybe Midjourney if I want to maybe create some ideas for wireframes or ideas for prototypes, maybe look and feel. Is it going to be quite futuristic? Should it be a bit more stripped back? And get a sense of a direction that should be heading in with that. And then use Figma to create my own wireframes. Maybe use tools like UiZod to input some more templated wireframes, get a hero image here, a 3-panel here, and, work with it that way. And then ultimately create wireframes and a prototype that I'm quite happy with. Then we can move them across to the development team and they can use GitHub Copilot, they can use ChatGPT to help refine their code and get it to the destination. So we built the product and now we need to play it back to the client through either a case study or some documentation. And this is something I didn't really talk about a little bit too much, so let's dive into it just a bit. And how can we use tools to help us provide slide decks to the client or write documentation that is going to be used to evaluate the product against and potentially sell on in the future? So what we can do is, again, work with ChatGPT in the chat that we've been using, and we can start to ask it to provide some summaries, or we can ask it to provide some descriptions about certain things that we've spoken about. We can also feed it back some information to enhance its learning and, again, help us get some key concepts out that we can refine and make sure that we give it a sense check before putting it into a deck and sending off. There are also a few slide deck AI tools as well out there that I've not really used too much. It doesn't seem like there's an emerging player in that market yet either, but there are definitely some that help with idea generation when it comes to PowerPoint layouts and presentations. I would just say keep an eye on that space before getting too invested in some of these technologies, unless you have found one that really works for you. So we've looked at the full product development cycle and how AI can impact every step along the way. And I think it's important to kind of think about some of those areas that you're involved in. I think everybody will be involved in that initial understanding of the work. So being able to synthesize some information is going to be really beneficial for you. But of course, you might be a designer, you might be a developer, you might be a researcher, product manager. And it's all about thinking, how can these tools impact the work that I do? So if you're somebody who works a lot in Excel, there may be, I think there's Google Docs AI going to be coming out soon as well, which is quite interesting. And like I said, Microsoft Copilot, which can help with Excel formulas, it can help with query building, and ultimately just making a lot of the mundane tasks a lot easier for you. So just have a little bit of a think about some of the generic day-to-day tasks that you do, and if AI can help you achieve them much quicker or improve idea generation tenfold. And that's going to be it for this podcast. So thank you so much for listening once again. It's been a very tricky one to make, this one, actually, because, diving into some of these subject areas, you need to make sure that you're covering off the essentials while still diving into enough information to keep people interested, but making sure that it's quite accurate. So it's been very fun. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I look forward to creating the next podcast, which should be out every Tuesday. We're going to kind of go with that generic structure and see how things play out. It might become more frequent, might become less frequent, but I think generally speaking, a weekly podcast will be a good format for this. So as always, drop a subscribe, ring the bell, all of that stuff if you're on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please do leave a rating and a follow to make sure that you get updated every week when we have a new episode out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.